Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Mr. President, Mr. Stack, Mr. Joe Cronin, Chairman of the Veterans Committee, Mr. Feeney, the President of the National League, Mr. MacPhail, the President of the American League, members of the Hall of Fame, my partners in this ceremony, Robbie and Hank and the fellow that you just heard. Ladies and gentlemen, I feel a bit like the mosquito that flew over the fence into the nudist camp. I hardly know where to start. Well, I first would express my gratitude to Almighty God for His kindness to me in letting me come to this day. This is a blessed day in the lives of the members of the Chandler family. I'm not the star of our team, but I'm going to introduce you to the one that is, Mama Chandler. Mama, will you stand up, please, ma'am? And the other members of my family, children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, will you please stand? I've been married to that girl 57 years, and I keep saying that's a great tribute to my patience. Every now and then as I travel about the country, and I'm past my 84th birthday, and at the end of this day, I will have been the oldest man ever elected to the Baseball Hall of Fame. The folks, Bill, around the country, I see my friend Bill Bartholomew, they say, you're a healthy-looking cuss, Happy, and I said, well, when we're courting, she made me a proposition which seemed entirely fair. I think I'd have taken it anyway. But she said if we fussed, I was to go outdoors, and I said 57 years in the open air will contribute greatly to a fellow's good health. For my friend Tommy Lasorda, I have to tell one story because he liked it so much. I said on a certain occasion, Joe, that she'd been outspoken and I wanted to know by whom. And then somebody asked me, how is she? And I said, well, I haven't spoken to her for 2 weeks. Said, what's the matter? I said, I hadn't wanted to interrupt her. And then some fella said, she bugged me. And you fellas who are married know what I'm talking about. She said, among other things, she wanted me to take her someplace she hadn't been, so I took her to the kitchen. I have so much to say and so little time to say it. There must be a sad note into the lives of all of us. Some rain must fall. And I'm missing today my dad, who stood with me on 2 occasions when I took the oath of office as governor of the Commonwealth of Kentucky. And that never happened to anybody else in the lifetime of the people of our Commonwealth. I used to bring him to the World Series. He was in his 80s, and I thought he was old. I don't think so now. I introduced him to Connie Mack and to Mr. Clark Griffith. For the first time in his life, he was speechless. He stood and shook his head and uttered 2 words. He says, "Cornelius McGillicuddy." And then I introduced him to Clark Griffith, and he thought of 1 more word. He said, "The old fox." But I'm certain he's standing on the ramparts of Valhalla, observing this scene, that he knows about it, and that within the hour, his name will forever be enshrined in the Baseball Hall of Fame. The Veterans Committee, Mr. Cronin, and all your associates have honored me beyond my due. I made some modest contributions, as the record will show, to Major League Baseball. I'd like to tell you briefly the Jackie Robinson story because I know it better than anybody else, living or dead. For 24 years, my predecessor would not let the black men play. Now that's the record. If you were black, you were automatically disqualified. He went further than that. He wouldn't let them barnstorm together after the season was over. And I'm not going to be too harsh with him because he was doing what the owners wanted him to do, and that was keep the game white and segregated. In January of 1947, the owners had a meeting at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York, and I presided over the meeting. It was closed to the press. They had anticipated that the Brooklyn team might want to bring Jackie Robinson from Montreal to Brooklyn. They debated the Robinson issue for an hour and a half or 2 hours and then took a vote. I announced the vote, presided over the meeting, and announced the vote. 15 noes and 1 yes. Well, immediately after that meeting, I had gone to the French hospital to see my friend Babe Ruth. I knew him quite well. And he had been neglected, unfortunately. We got him up, though, and got him a job and gave him another chance and gave him a special day. The day we gave him a special day, it happened that I had suspended a fella that I thought ought to be suspended. He wrote a book. It wasn't required reading, so I didn't read it. And it wasn't a bestseller. But 73,000 people, I think this must be a record, booed me in the Yankee Stadium because of that decision. Well, I stood my ground and looked them straight in the eye, and then 50,000 cheered me. And I never had too much trouble after that. But Mr. Rickey called me and said to me, "I must come to Kentucky and talk with you at once." So I said, "All right, Mr. Rickey, you come along." I got a cabin on the backside of my place where I've made most of my important decisions in this life. It's 50 years old. I used to invite my friends, Ty Cobb and all the others. They used to come. I told Bear Bryant once that the beds were comfortable and the food's fair and the rates were right, and he said, "Skipper, on these terms, I'm gonna give you a generous share of my business." Mr. Rickey came down to the cabin and we talked for about 2 hours about Jackie Robinson. And he said, "Commissioner, I can't do this unless I'm assured of your complete support." And I said, "I know that, Mr. Rickey. This 15-to-1 vote was meant to be information for you and information for me. They do not want the black men to play." And I said, I have said to Rick Roberts and John Holloway and others that I didn't think it was quite fair to have these fellows fight at Okinawa and Iwo Jima and Tarawa and the other places, and then to be told when they came back home that they couldn't play the great American game, baseball, although they were very talented. I told them I thought that was wrong. This statement must be taken as self-serving because I'm not running for anything. And I'm not running from anything either. So I said to Mr. Rickey, "I'm going to have to meet my maker someday, and if he asks me why I didn't let this boy play, and I say it was because he's black, that might not be a satisfactory answer. I said, you bring him in and I'll approve of the transfer of his contract from Montreal to Brooklyn. And I did, and I was the only one that could have done it. And I said to Mr. Rickey, if Landis were commissioner, you wouldn't go to see him because he wouldn't let you. And he said all had been said about the thing, had already been said, and he had nothing else to say about it. And you wouldn't have even asked him because it wouldn't have made any difference. And I said, you bring him in, and we monitored every game he played. They said, how are we going to treat this fella? Just as another ball player, no better and no worse. Don't give him anything, but don't take anything away from him. And we made the switch, and there are those people, other people tried to take, I wasn't seeking any credit for it. I was doing what justice and mercy required me to do under the circumstances. And if I had to do over again, I'd do the same thing. I am, as the commissioner said, more responsible for the players' pension fund than anybody living or dead. Tom Gallery called me immediately after I was elected to the Hall of Fame, and he always called me Champ. He said, Champ, we made the original television contracts. The owners had given themselves 5 years, and they'd also given themselves the right to quit in 5 years if they didn't like it, and a great many of them didn't like it. I didn't blame them for that. But they didn't know that I had gotten pensions for state workers in Kentucky, pensions for school teachers in Kentucky, and pensions for state police in Kentucky. And I was committed to, and another thing I saw that you didn't see, I saw Grover Cleveland Alexander and Dazzy Vance playing with the House of David in order to get enough money to temporarily live on. And I always thought it was a great pity that we had to permit that to go on, especially when those baseball players had made magnificent contributions to the game. And yet, a great many of them in those days, except for baseball, couldn't do anything else. Well, we made the pension fund actuarially sound. And I don't believe the ball players of today who are recipients of that pension ought to be very seriously mad with me about it, because we made it actuarially sound, and if I may say so, it's one of the best pension plans that exists in this land today. I never make a speech to American baseball fans without saying a word about the umpires. You know, been a move on foot for many years, take them off the field and put them in the grandstand on the theory that you can see it better from there. That never has been brought about because, and I have all of my life, well, I was an umpire in the Bluegrass League. I was a player in the Bluegrass League, and Earl Combs said I was a good field and no hit. I had a tryout in the West Canadian League 62 years again this summer in Saskatchewan, Saskatoon. Wasn't quite good enough. That's what the man said. And I had to take his word for it. But the umpires are men of courage, they're men of character, and even though they've got these replays, all sorts of gadgets, you rarely ever find out any of those things that prove, Joe, that they're wrong. They hustle, they're men of honor, they're men of character. Never in the history of American sport has an umpire been charged with doing a dishonorable act. And of course, I love Jocko Conlon, who's here today and is a member of the Hall of Fame. And really, he's the only one I'm jealous of. He'd been married to his girl 62 years. Mama, that puts us 5 years down. I also want to say one word, and this is not in criticism, but I never had any good luck with 3/4 of the votes, and the record would show that. I almost got 3/4 when I negotiated for a new contract in 1951. Couldn't get it. They held out 5, and 5 was sufficient. I would hate to see at this moment in our history a confrontation between the club owners and the commissioner. The commissioner is a splendid gentleman. He's had 14 years in the commissioner's office. He has learned, he has grown in stature. He's a man of honor, he's a man of courage, and a man of integrity. And I tell you this, if they have a confrontation with him, it wouldn't surprise me, because I've been in the United States Senate, once appointed and twice elected. I know the disposition of people, and there are people up there now just itching to give you fellas a federal commissioner. They haven't been all the other countries, so they say, why not here? I don't ever want that to happen. And what the Congress of the United States permits the baseball people to do now is manage their own affairs. And if they ever come convinced that you're not going to manage your own affairs, they may undertake to manage them for you. And I have no special knowledge about it, but I have a bump on my head, and my mama didn't drop me. She was careful with me. The bumps I got on my head, I earned. I'm going to make, at this point, a suggestion to my friend Joe Cronin and to Mr. Stack and their associates, and I have for them nothing but profound respect and admiration. I would risk my life with Joe Cronin and with the commissioner. I trust them. But I say the one thing I want them to undertake, if possible, to reconsider. It took them 31 years to get to me, and I almost missed it. They only take one a year in these categories, and this is a mission of mercy for me. I think they're black men and white men who have made magnificent contributions to baseball, standing on the outside, hoping and praying and pleading for this opportunity. And it may never come. And I'll be sad. The last two or three they elected in my category had been dead, one of them for 30 years. The other one for 3 and the other one for 5. I'm not much on electing to fellows to the Hall of Fame or any other thing after he's dead. In the garden of tomorrow, the roses may be more fair. But I'd so much rather all my love flowers gather in the garden of today. And I think we owe it to these fellows, and for a time at least. And I have no wish to open up the Hall of Fame to people who are not qualified. They might even change the 3/4 rule, because I say, in my political life in Kentucky, if I got the most, I won. I wasn't required to get 3/4 of the vote, and I've never had any great enthusiasm for that 3/4 vote. I want to say how sad I am that Bob Addy's gone. And I knew many years ago when I was at the Senate that Pauline Betts was one of the great tennis players of all time. And Bob Addy wanted me to be elected to the Hall of Fame. And he, like my daddy, and like Papa Coon and all the others, who we've loved long since and lost a while, I know they know about it. You know, Browning said it best for me, and I've said it to Mama. Come grow old with me. The best is yet to be. The last of life for which the first was made. And Holmes said it best for me when he, at 19, wrote this lovely poem about the fellow that lived to be 90. He said, the mossy marbles rest on the lips that he has pressed in their bloom. And the names he loved to hear have been carved for many a year on the tomb. My grandmother, she once said, poor old lady, she's dead long ago, that he had a Roman nose and his cheek was like a rose in the snow. Oh, I know it's a sin for me to sit and grin at him here, but the old 3-cornered hat and the breeches and all that are so queer. And if I should live to be the last leaf upon the tree in the spring, let them smile as I do now at the old forsaken bough where I cling. I stand a little straighter and shed a tear when the flag goes by. This is the greatest country on earth. 2 weeks ago, I joined the commissioner in Montreal when we took the game to the Canadian side for the first time in the history of baseball in this hemisphere. The Montreal fellas did a magnificent job in having us as their guests there. I have followed politics and baseball and religion, not necessarily in that order, because I say I'm not sure about the extent of my prayers, but I am about Mama's. If she says prayers for you, they're going to get there. And if they don't, they better just tear the thing up and start all over again. Because when they play the Saints go marching in, if Mama isn't leading them, they're going to have to call off to march. Nearly 200 years of glorious history lie back of the people of this republic. I support and defend the President of the United States and Miss Nancy. And one of the first messages I got came from him and from Mr. Nixon, one of our better presidents in my lifetime. And I appreciate, I don't mind, my God, that's the way I feel about it. And I think the record will show, and records live, opinions die. And so on this occasion, I'd like to conclude by saying, God bless the people of the United States. May they continue to use this resource, which we have, baseball, to our advantage. And for our Canadian neighbors and friends, God save the Queen. Thank you, and God bless you all.